Hello and welcome to Wedding Wednesdays with Weddings Online. My name is Kelly and I'm a former wedding planner and blogger, and I'm obsessed with weddings. If you're planning a wedding in Ireland, you're in the right place. You're going to learn the tried and tested methods to planning your dream wedding without the added stress. Think of this as your one-stop shop for everything to do with planning your wedding in Ireland, with me, your new wedding planning bestie, and a cup of tea. This is Wedding Wednesdays with Weddings Online. Timing, as they say, is everything. When it comes to planning your wedding, you're going to have hundreds of things that you need to do, not to freak you out. But the secret to staying sane while making hundreds of decisions is to understand the timing and to know which things can wait. And I'm going to share a list of those at the end of this episode. But more importantly, which things you need to focus on and not put off. So today, I'm going to share a list of some wedding planning tasks that you absolutely cannot wait until the last minute to even think about. And I'll explain why. So most of these things are things that you may be tempted to delay thinking about. Maybe they are just a little bit boring compared to some of the other tasks, or you just don't think they're as important. So I'm just going to explain each one, why you should give it a little bit of thought, and then we're going to end the episode with a short list of some tasks that absolutely can wait, just to put your mind at ease that you don't need to do hundreds of things all at once. Well, let's get started with the very first thing, booking your wedding supplier team. Now, there really is no wedding without an amazing team of wedding suppliers pulling everything together and making it all happen for you. And you might be surprised to hear that it's quite common for wedding suppliers to be booked up about 12 to 18 months in advance. So if you are getting married in 12 to 18 months' time and you haven't started booking suppliers, now is a great time to begin. So if you see someone that you love, if you know that they're available on your date and they meet the aesthetic, they fit into your budget and all the other boxes that you might feel you need to tick, just book them. Just go for it. Don't delay. The last thing you want to do is to meet someone who's amazing and then you delay putting in your deposit and then they get scooped up by somebody else. Next is inviting your guests. Now, okay, it quite literally is not a wedding without your friends and family involved. And so you want to make sure that you're inviting people. But also from a logistical perspective, there are quite a few things that happen once you have your head count. So you need to know how much food should be ordered. You've got to know how many chairs to hire, how many wedding favors you need, and anything else like that is a per person item or cost. And so there are lots of consequences, positive consequences that come from knowing how many people you're going to have at your wedding. So this is the sort of order that I recommend couples think about things. First, create your rough guest list. And I always recommend doing this before you even look for wedding venues. So your wedding venue is going to help you to determine what date you're getting married in, because once you have a venue, you then have your date and your location. But in order to have a wedding venue that you know is suitable, it's helpful to have a rough idea of how many people you want at your wedding. So what's not helpful is to just say, let's get a wedding venue for like 150 people. First, make your rough guest list so that you know that 150 people is actually what you're kind of thinking of. And so you don't need to have the guest list set in stone or anything like that, but just having a rough idea means that when you find your wedding venue, you know that it's compatible with your guest list. Then, once you have your venue and you've booked it, you've got your date, you now have your location, you can then send your save the dates out. And you could do that up to a year in advance. If you know that people are traveling from far away, or if you know that you're having a destination wedding and lots of people will be traveling, you can send your save the dates even further out than that. Then your invitations go out usually a few months before, and then you start putting everything together with your specific guest list and your specific head count. But your rough guest list really helps you to stay within your budget. And then the specific guest list of exactly who's RSVP'd, that will really help you to narrow down the details, which will come a little bit later on. And we'll talk about that at the end of the episode. But as you can see, knowing who you're inviting is a very crucial step. Okay, the next thing that you can't delay on is having a plan B. Now, this is what I think happens to people. We have this amazing picture in our head of a lovely sunny wedding day with a gentle breeze and spending a lot of time outside. Maybe it's an outdoor ceremony that you have in mind. And then between the ceremony and the reception, there's like lawn games and, outdoor furniture, and everybody's having a lovely time outside in the warm weather that's not too hot. And then we think, what we'll do is we'll check the weather closer to the time. Because obviously, if you check the weather now for 18 months' time, you're not going to get much. So we'll wait till it's like a couple of weeks before, and we'll check the weather then. And then we'll check the weather every day leading up to the wedding. And if we think it's going to rain, or if we think it's going to be like blisteringly hot or super windy, or whatever the weather concern is that you have, then we'll get a plan B. So my recommendation is to have a plan B in mind from the beginning. And if you need to action it, you then have a plan that's already in motion and you can say, let's go, we're doing this. So here's what I reckon you do. When you're looking for wedding venues, ask what their plan B is. So if your plan A is to have an outdoor ceremony, find out what their plan B is. It might be a marquee, it might be another part of the venue that you could go into that could be beautifully set up for a ceremony. And then it could be that you still have a separate reception space and, space where people can hang out during the pre-drinks, all of that kind of thing. But ask what the plan B is so that you know. Then, when you're creating your budget, factor in any contingency plans. So it might mean you hiring a marquee, so you put that cost into your budget. It might mean hiring or buying loads of umbrellas, or having extra bottles of water and handheld fans if you think that the heat is going to be a problem. Whatever you think it might be, have something in your budget so that if you need to action plan B, it's there and ready to go. Now, it's one thing to have a backup location or a bit of a backup plan, but you actually need to be able to coordinate your supplier team to action the plan. So I recommend discussing all of these things with your suppliers and your venue coordinator well ahead of time. And then, of course, check the weather as you get closer to the day, and you'll know if you need to action that plan or not. But the key here is not to wait until a week before the wedding to go, oh, we probably need a backup plan. What should we do? Because that's just asking for stress. And then you end up going over budget too, which is even more stress. Okay, the next thing is your menu. Now, of course, you have to, you can only make certain decisions once you've got your head count, your specific head count. And what some people do is if you're having meals plated per guest, what we did was we actually got our guests to decide what they were going to eat before the day, and we were able to then create a seating plan for the kitchen staff where they knew exactly who was sitting where, who had allergies, and who had ordered which meals. And it was quite a helpful thing. It actually ended up saving us money because we weren't paying for, extra food or anything. We were just paying for exactly what each person was going to be eating. But we made those decisions ahead of time, and we agreed that would be what we would do. But what you need to work out with your wedding venue, with your venue coordinator, and the kitchen staff team, is you need to decide on the serving style, because that's going to have an impact on your staffing options, the room setup, and then the timing of the evening. Because the way you time dinner for a buffet is completely different to how you would time dinner for plated meals that would be served to each individual, or a family style serving option where you've got shared platters per table. So whichever option you go for, it makes sense to pick that early on, to have that discussion with your wedding venue coordinator to find out what the costs will be and how that would impact your timing. And then your really specific menu options can come a little bit later on. But think about your service options and what you may want to do, because that will determine the style of the day, like how you serve things. If you want things to be really relaxed, that buffet style or the banquet style with the family platters can work really well. But discuss it with your wedding venue coordinator. You'll know what your options are and you'll know which decisions to make now. Okay, the next thing is the paperwork. Now, when you think about things like cake tastings and dress fittings, the paperwork can seem really dull, and I don't blame you for wanting to put it off. But it's something that's easily overlooked, and it really shouldn't be. You don't want to delay the paperwork, because I know we've said you can't have a wedding without your supplier team, and you can't have a wedding without your, friends and family, but you literally cannot get married without the legal paperwork sorted. You need to have your green folder with you. You need to have all the details settled ahead of time. There's so many steps that need to take place. And if you're getting legally married on the day of your wedding, you don't want to forget anything. So I recommend having a conversation with your solemnizer to talk about the legal things. You need to know exactly what your unique steps are, and you want to do those with plenty of time to spare. You want to make sure you've signed your supplier contracts. You want to know that you've looked through the fine print, you've asked any questions that you may have, and that you understand, if you've paid for X amount of hours for the supplier, and if you may want to go over that by having an extra couple of hours on the day, you want to know ahead of time what that's going to cost, what the implications are, and how to action that process. So don't forget the paperwork, because it is really, really important, and it is quite literally a make or break thing for you. Okay, we've got 2 more items, and then we're going to go through a very short list of things that can wait. Next item is your vows. Now, for my wedding, my husband and I, we didn't write our own vows. We had some vows that were created, and what we had decided ahead of time was the tone that we wanted the vows to be. So for us, we had decided that we wanted the tone to be our intention is to do X, Y, and Z. And so we made these promises to each other with this, this particular tone that we had settled on with our officiant. But we only really looked at the vows the day before the wedding. And it was like the night before the wedding that I was kind of thinking about it. And I didn't really give it a huge amount of thought, because the vows were written already, what is there to do? But actually, if I could go back in time, I would have sat down and read through things in more detail, maybe familiarize myself with the phrasing a bit more so I could feel more confident and eloquent in how I was delivering the words. Looking back, I'm very happy with what we said and the promises that we made. So there were no issues there. But I always recommend that people give this a little bit more thought, because next to the legal side of things, the promises are a very, very important part of the day. You can have a wedding without a huge party, but you can't have a wedding without exchanging vows and making promises to your spouse, because that's the whole point of what you're doing. And so don't overlook this. Don't wait to the last minute. Take your time. If you're writing your own vows, especially, don't wait till the last minute. In fact, if you can give yourself a bit of a head start, like even 3 months out, just write down anything that you might want to say, and then you can begin to organize your thoughts as you get a little bit closer to the time. But the key here is don't delay. These are really, really important promises you're going to be making, and you don't want to put them off till the last minute. Okay, the final item is your passports. So if you are planning on going on your honeymoon either right after the wedding or even just a couple of weeks after the wedding, make sure you've looked at your passports. You want to make sure that they have been renewed and that you have plenty of empty pages inside your passport. I've heard of people being turned away, at the airport because they didn't have enough pages inside the passport. And so make sure that you've sorted out all of those things. When it comes to any kind of travel document like visas, or if you need to have any kind of injections or vaccinations or anything and you need the paperwork to prove that you've done it, make sure you've done it all with time to spare. You don't want to be waiting until, a week before and you're like, oh, we haven't sorted out our passports, because that's just asking for stress that you don't need at that time. Okay, I said I was going to end with a short list of things that can wait. So these are things that you absolutely can wait to do. Number 1 is your wedding attire. Now, of course, you don't want to wait too long for this because you want to make sure you have the right dress and that it fits and you've got time for alterations. But what I really mean here is you need to make a couple of decisions before you start looking at wedding dresses and suits and heels and veils and all the rest of it. First, you need to make sure that you have your date and your location and your aesthetic, and bonus, your budget. And I'll tell you why. If you haven't decided on these things, you could end up buying a dress that either doesn't fit into your budget or doesn't match your location or the season that you're getting married in. Maybe you've always pictured getting married in summer at a hotel, and so that's the kind of style dress that you've been picturing. And then maybe you end up changing the plan and you end up getting married in winter, and it's a completely different style venue and it's like your new dream wedding aesthetic. But if the dress you've picked is a summer dress and you end up getting married in freezing cold winter, you're going to be uncomfortable and you're not going to match the style of your own wedding. So before you start looking at the attire, just make sure you've ticked a couple of boxes first. Okay, second thing that can wait is your song choices. Now, you don't want to wait too long, of course, because your band and your singers will still, they'll want to learn specific songs for you, but you don't have to decide on them right now. These are things that can come. These are some of the details that come closer to the time. So book your band. Let them know that you may have a couple of songs that you'd really love for them to play at special moments. but then wait until you've solidified a few other details before you get there. Item number 3 is your smaller decor items. These are the details that you don't need to think about right now because you want to get started with the big hitters. You want to make sure you've got your venue, your photographer, you got the legal things sorted, and you've got some of these bigger items checked off before you start really honing in on the details. So you don't need to know now what color napkins you're having and if they match the bridesmaids' dresses. Like, you really don't need to worry about that right now. And then the final item that can wait is your seating chart. Now, of course, you can't make a seating chart until you know who's going to be there. So you first have to make your guest list. Then, of course, book your venue. Then you send out your save the dates. You send out your invitations. You get your RSVPs back. Inevitably, you need to chase a few people to see if they're actually coming or not. But then once you have all your guests locked in, that's when you can begin making your seating chart. And of course, you will need the help of your wedding venue coordinator just to check what the layout of your wedding venue is actually going to be based on your head count. So I hope that that's helped you and given you a little bit of peace of mind knowing that you're on the right track by prioritizing some of your tasks and to breathe a deep sigh of relief to go, you know what, some of these things that I'm stressing about can actually wait. Well, thank you for listening today. The Wedding Wednesdays with Weddings Online podcast is produced by me, Kelly, and mixed, mastered, and edited by Glenn Hartman. For more wedding planning tips, advice, checklists, and more, visit weddingsonline.ie.